welcome. You're watching World 360. I'm Akanksha Swaroop. Hamas has started the release of Israel's hostages and aid is finally trickling into Gaza as the first pause begins. This after 7 weeks of hostilities between Israel and Hamas. What will be the implications of this truce for Israel's fighting? And will this bring relief to the humanitarian disaster in Gaza? That's our top focus on World 360 this week. But first up are the headlines. The temporary truce that was negotiated between Israel and Hamas in Gaza took effect early Friday morning, marking the start of an expected hostage release prisoner swap. North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un has congratulated his team of scientists for launching a spy satellite. The technology enables Pyongyang to monitor the movement of US and South Korean troops and weapons on the Korean peninsula. In the wake of a knife attack that left 3 children and a teacher injured, Dublin city centre witnessed a night of violent clashes, resulting in 34 arrests on Friday. And China says no unusual or novel pathogens discovered in clusters of child pneumonia cases after WHO queries respiratory outbreaks. A deal between Israel and Hamas for a temporary pause for at least a 4-day truce in hostilities is now taking place. 13 Israeli hostages were the first batch to be released to the staff of the International Committee for Red Cross and were taken from Khan Yunis in southern Gaza to the Rafah crossing into Israel. This has been confirmed by an Israeli official. Now, the accord was orchestrated by Qatar and the US and officially announced earlier this week as well. The secretive efforts included tense personal diplomatic engagements by US President Joe Biden, who held a number of urgent conversations with the Emir of Qatar and Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in the weeks leading up to this entire deal. The agreement entails a complete ceasefire with no attacks from the air or the ground and the skies clear of drones to allow for the hostage release to happen in a safe environment. Israel Defense Forces have launched an offensive in Gaza since 1,200 citizens were killed in a Hamas attack on October 7th. Hamas had also taken nearly 240 hostages, mostly civilians, when their operatives burst across the border fence and raided towns in southern Israel. It's important to highlight that Israel Defense Forces have made it amply clear that this is not a civilian-to-civilian exchange. Instead, Palestinians that will now be released from Israel are either terrorists or terror suspects. Listen in to this CNN News 18 exclusive with IDF spokesperson Major Libby Weiss. Major Libby Weiss, thank you for joining in on CNN News 18. The IDF, I know, has been very vocal about establishing that this is not going to be a ceasefire. Is it not true that the IDF is calling it an operational pause, and why so?
Yes, we are calling this an operational pause, and I think it's an important difference to make. We are now waiting really to receive the final instructions on the political level to initiate this pause. And it's important to emphasize that at the conclusion of this pause, we will continue to do everything within our power to accomplish our goals of this war, which is, one, to bring back the rest of our hostages and to make sure that Hamas is never in a position of power to terrorize Israelis ever again. And we will absolutely resume both of those goals and make sure that we accomplish them.
Media reports in Egypt and Israel have been suggesting that a truce would come into effect at 10 a.m. local time. Could you confirm when the truce will begin?
Well, I am still waiting to receive the final confirmation on the political level within our country. And once that is announced, then I'm sure you will hear about it as well. But we are waiting to receive that confirmation along with you.
Fair enough. Major, could you shed more light on the hostages which will be released by Hamas? Will they also include American hostages?
Well, I don't want to go into too many of the specifics. We do understand that there is discussion around women and children. And it's important to emphasize that there are many hostages who will remain. And we are going to do everything to get them home as soon as possible. But certainly we will be sharing more information as that is finalized and as it comes to light.
All right, Major, could you tell us more about the Palestinian prisoners who are set to be released in exchange for Israel's Hamas captives? Who are these Palestinian prisoners?
I think it's important to emphasize that we're talking here about people who are under suspicion or who have already been convicted of terrorism. This is clearly not a trade of civilians to civilians, but we certainly will respect whatever decision is made on the political level, and will welcome the return of our hostages home who are civilians, and it's important to emphasize that point. But those who will be released back to the Gaza Strip are those who have been tried and found guilty of terrorist activity and are absolutely involved in terrorism.
How would you like to respond to human rights groups and those anti-terror groups who've been very vocal about saying that this is against the norms, that the number of Palestinians that are being released for the number of hostages is not fair?
Well, the military has passed its assessment to the political level, and really this is a decision for the political level to decide. We are a democracy, and that is how it works in democratic countries, and certainly how it works here. And we will respect and carry out whatever decision is made on the political level.
Should we expect a longer ceasefire if Hamas is willing to release more hostages?
Well, again, I think it's a bit above my pay grade. I can say that we will carry out whatever decision will be made really on that political level, as they are the main party responsible for making these kinds of decisions for the state of Israel. And we'll follow whatever instructions we receive.
Major Weiss, how will IDF and Israeli government ensure the safety of the hostages this time around, considering several Israeli captives in the past have not even made it back alive?
Well, certainly it's a topic that is very important to us, and there are certainly many discussions that are being had, and I won't go into any of the specifics. So you can imagine that's it's not something that would be appropriate for me to discuss, and something that, again, I think the political level will have to decide upon, and can elaborate further on that. I can say from the perspective of the military that we will do whatever we have to do to bring back our hostages. That was a goal, one of the two goals that we set for these operations from the beginning, and we will carry that out to the end.
I know, Prime Minister Netanyahu has repeatedly said that there are two goals to this war: one, the return of all the hostages, and second, the destruction of Hamas. How will Israel prepare after a pause that could give a clear military advantage to Hamas by granting Hamas more time to strategize?
Well, first, we believe that the significant operational achievements that we have made in the last nearly month has really put us in a position where we will hopefully see the return of our hostages. We've been striking Hamas terror shafts, and we've released just today an updated figure on the fact that we've struck more than 400. We've also targeted senior Hamas terror leaders, and we will continue to engage in that activity at the conclusion of this pause, which is why I think the terminology here is important, that this is a pause. This is not the end of what we are doing. And we will do whatever we have to make sure that Israelis can live without the threat of Hamas, and to make sure that we never see something like October 7th happen again to Israeli civilians.
Last but not least, how does IDF assess accusations that the hospital raids have violated international humanitarian law, since hospitals, including patients and medical staff, receive special protection during armed conflict?
Well, I would completely reject those accusations. We, from the beginning, have always been guided by international law in everything that we are doing. We have made the information about the hospitals public from the start, and you can see that our very precise activity within the hospitals is aimed only at Hamas and Hamas infrastructure, which I think we've really proven beyond any kind of doubt exists within Shifa and under Shifa and in other hospitals, while really mitigating any possible impact on the medical teams and, of course, the patients who are in these hospitals. And I think the real question here is why Hamas would use places exactly like hospitals, places that should have a special status, why they are using them for terror activity and why there are tunnels that are dug underneath them, why missiles and RPGs and ammunition are being stored. I can't imagine any hospital anywhere outside of the Gaza Strip and ruled by Hamas where we would find these kinds of terror tools and weapons. And the fact that Hamas is using these hospitals, I think here is the real crime.
Major, how does IDF respond to Hamas officials denying the allegations, including the hospital staff saying that the videos that have been released by IDF showing that Hamas is housing military infrastructure beneath hospitals are untrue?
I think it's preposterous. The evidence is at this stage, I think, so clear that anybody who doesn't accept the evidence for what it is, I think is just looking to disregard fact. But again, I would also instruct anybody who is listening to think with great skepticism around anything that Hamas is saying. This is the same terror organization that has taken more than 230 civilians as hostages, who are currently holding children and women and the elderly and innocent people and holding them illegally. And I think that any claims that the evidence somehow shows something else these claims are preposterous.
Major Libby West, thank you so much for talking to us here at CNN News 18. It was a pleasure to have your precious insights on our show.
Thank you.
Also speaking at a virtual meeting of G20 leaders, the final major event during India's presidency of the grouping, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi reiterated India's careful and balanced position on this entire conflict, asserting that terrorism was unacceptable and the death of civilians anywhere was condemnable. Listen in.
हम मानते हैं कि आतंकवाद हम सभी को अस्वीकार्य है। सिविलियंस की मौत कहीं भी हो निंदनीय है। आज हुए हॉस्टेजेस के रिलीज के समाचार का हम स्वागत करते हैं। उम्मीद करते हैं कि सभी हॉस्टेजेस जल्दी रिहा हो जाएंगे। मानवीय सहायता का समय से और निरंतर पहुंचना आवश्यक है। यह सुनिश्चित करना भी जरूरी है कि इजरायल और हमास की लड़ाई किसी तरह का क्षेत्रीय रूप धारण न कर ले। आज संकटों के जो बादल हम देख रहे हैं, वन फैमिली में वह ताकत है कि हम शांति के लिए काम कर सकते हैं।